All right, everybody, welcome to the This Land is My Land Israeli-Palestinian Conflict screencast for vocabulary. There'll be some terms in here that you're not as familiar with, that unless you know them and can use them, won't be as successful in this unit. So let's arm ourselves here with some vocabulary to really kind of take this unit head on. All right. First thing you need to know is you need a piece of notebook paper, and Miss Foss's class, I know you guys have a notebook that you actually need, so I would tell you guys for my class, just grab a piece of lined paper, writing utensil, and bring your brain. All right, good notes here and reminders from Miss Foss. And guys, don't just write things down word for word or put the sound off or whatever. A lot of times we'll have some bullet points there, but then expound and kind of talk more about, make some connections between terms or give you some context, help you better understand them. So I would watch a slide, listen to me, look at the picture, look at the word, then decide what to write down for your kind of own personal definition. If you just write down what I have, that's just you practicing your handwriting, which is a kindergarten skill, which is a first grade skill. So you guys should be viewing, processing in your brain, and spitting something back out onto the paper. Then you'll know it much better. All right, first term is state. As Americans, you probably think of a state as like one of the states like Michigan or Ohio or Florida or something. A state can also mean a nation. And you'll hear that over and over and over again in this controversy here between Israel and Palestine. Often you'll hear this where the Palestinians want a state or want a nation, whereas the state of Israel is already established and is an operating, autonomous, kind of self-governing country. So again, state doesn't mean like we think necessarily as parts of a nation. This is the nation itself, a nation state. A territory is different. A territory is kind of a piece of land that's not as organized or isn't independent, doesn't have full status, right? So while Israel is a state, the Palestinians live in what are called most of the Palestinians live in what's known as the Palestinian territories. And the two we're focusing on here, the two are the West Bank and Gaza Strip. All right, so again, as we said from the last screencast, the West Bank is here much larger, all right, on the western bank of the River Jordan, and the Gaza Strip is this little strip of land here, maybe 10 miles wide in parts, next to Egypt and near the Mediterranean Sea. All right, next term, partition. And this can be used, again, partition, a lot of these words can be used anywhere else. You'll hear them on the news, or you'll hear them, you can use them in a research paper or something. So it's not just specific to Israel-Palestine. So partition means dividing something. A lot of times, I know like in Mrs. Forbeck's classroom, there's a partition that separates what used to be Mrs. Hodges' classroom. Sometimes Mr. Munoz, I know, uses that for science class or whatever. So if you've likely been in a lot of different classrooms that have that kind of partition in there, or they can lower the partition in the gym and divide it into parts. So partition means to divide. And when we use it here, it usually means to divide land into political territories or states. So the Holy Land has been partitioned many times. So some parts are for some people, some parts are for others. All right, occupation is a word we need to know. Occupation could also mean like a job, but this is a different meaning here. So it's a noun that means when the military of a government goes into an area and takes control. So rules by what we call martial law. So it's when the military of one country or one place is in charge of another place. It's an occupation. So the way we use it in this unit is that the Israeli troops occupy, or there's an Israeli occupation of the West Bank and Gaza, the Palestinian territories. So there's not, they kind of control, they are the police in a lot of ways. They are the power in that area. So there is no Palestinian military. Next term, settlement. A settlement, again, can be used in a lot of different contexts, a lot of different ways, a lot of different classes, however you want to put that. A settlement, we understand it as a place where people have moved, so they left kind of their own kind of homeland and moved and settled someplace else. And what's happened over the years, over the past 40 years especially, is that many Israelis have entered the West Bank and built their own settlements on hilltops. Right? So we see that the West Bank, which was originally, and a lot of people want to set it aside for a Palestinian state, is now dotted all over with these, dozens of Israeli settlements. Refugee, a lot of times you hear a refugee used with a natural disaster, so there'll be refugees of a hurricane or war or whatever, and here that's kind of like the latter case of war. A refugee is someone who has been forced to leave their home or land, and usually, as it says here, war, religious conflict, natural disaster. So the Palestinians, there's some controversy with this. The Palestinians, even though many of the people who were around in 1948, the partition of Israel or of Palestine, however you want to put that, many of these people who were refugees then are now obviously passed away, and so many of their children still keep this refugee status, claim refugee status, whereas many Israelis would say, no, they're not refugees anymore, this is where they live. All right, so that's kind of a controversial thing. Terrorism, something that gets talked about in the U.S. a lot in the past decade or so. Terrorism is the use of a violent act to frighten people. So the point of terrorism is terror. It's maybe not, the terrorist attacks of 9/11, where people flew planes into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. Those weren't designed to be things that would bring down the U.S. government, but would just terrify people. They had huge impacts and many people died, right? But the biggest impact, or the biggest point, was to terrify people across the country and around the world. And usually they're used to achieve a goal, and usually a political goal. So they want a nation out of a country, or they want a person in charge, or So terrorism's thousands of years old. It's nothing new, but usually it's with a political goal in mind. Last couple here. A militant. The word militant is a person that uses strong, extreme, forceful methods to achieve a goal. So when people stop talking to each other and negotiating with words and start fighting each other, oftentimes the people doing the fighting are called militants. And that's it for this slideshow. We'll see you next time. Thanks.